Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Minecraft modding tutorial for version 1.19. In this tutorial we are going to be covering how we can make a custom entity. So let's just go ahead and get started. So as usual, we're going to create our EntityInit. It would be great if I could type today. Okay, and once again, as usual, we want our public static final deferred register. This is of EntityType, and that will just take a question mark, and we're going to just call this I like to just call this entities, but you can call it entity types if you want. That'll be equal to your usual deferred register.create forward registries.entitytypes, and then just your mod ID, so tutorial mod.mod ID, and then we can just go ahead and actually create our entity. So we want our public static final registry objects of entity type of example entity, and I'll just call this example is equal entities.register. Then you just give it your name, so example. Then we'll do a supplier of entity type dot builder dot of, and then you give it an entity factory, which will just be your entity class, example entity : new. And then we can just provide a mob category, which is used for just a bunch of different things. Just give it the one which you think makes the most sense. So I'm just going to give it creature. I think that just makes the most sense. Then there are a few attributes you can add here. I'm not going to cover these. I think they are somewhat fairly explanatory. So the main one you are going to want to do is sized, and this will be for the hitbox. So this will be the width by the height. Unfortunately, there's no way to control the depth. That is a real flaw of entity hitboxes, so you kind of have to mess around with these two values a little bit, but you can get those to work. For now, I'm not going to do that until we've made the model, and then we'll know roughly what size we're going for. But that will probably require some tweaking. Then we can do .build, and this will build it into our needed entity type. So this takes in a string, and this will just be essentially the name of your entity. Now what I like to do for this, instead of having a hard-coded string, is just do a new resource location, and then just pass in your mod ID, tutorial.mod ID, and as the second parameter just give it your entity name, example, and then you can call .toString. The alternative and much simpler method here is just to do your mod ID, so tutorial.mod ID plus : example. And for the sake of this tutorial, just to make the code a little bit simpler, that's what we're going to do. Okay, fantastic. So we can now go ahead and create our entity class. So let's come into our main package, and we're going to create a new package for entities. And in here we'll create a new class. This will be example entity, and this can extend a multitude of classes. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to be extending animal. However, you can also extend anything else you want. So you can extend mob, you can extend monster, you can extend living entity if you want to go really down the line, or if you don't even want a living entity, you would just extend entity. However, I will have a separate tutorial on that in the future. And you can go also really high up the line as well. So you can say sheep, extends sheep, or you could say extends abstract horse or abstract fish. You've got to remember the vanilla classes do not prefix it with entity. So there is no suffix, not prefix. Yeah, they do not suffix it with entity. So it's not going to be abstract fish entity, it's just abstract fish. And that's also how you should actually do yours as well. But just so that I can keep this a little bit separate, I'm going to just add entity on the end. But say you're making, I don't know, a velociraptor, whatever, you would just do iraptor. Okay, yeah, you just do that instead of velociraptor entity. You just get rid of the entity. But because this is just an example entity, and so that we don't have stupid class names, I'm just going to call it example entity, and I'm going to go back to extending animal. Fantastic. And we're going to want to do the things it wants, so we need to implement the methods, and we also need to create the constructor. Okay, there we go. So let's just rename some parameters here. So we'll go the type there, and we'll go with the level there. Then we have the breed offspring. This is for when it is breeded. Obviously, if you're extending different classes, you're going to have slightly different methods, and you kind of just have to use some common sense to really figure out what you need to put in there. This also needs to be a public constructor, by the way. And in breed offspring, all you have to actually do, it's a fairly simple method, is just EntityInit.example.get.create, and then just pass in the level. And that should, we just need to actually come into our example and import that. There we go. And that fixes that error as well. Beautiful. And then you can override any method you want. So, for example, say you want to do something every tick, then, you know, just do something every tick. This dot level dot, I don't know. Just do something. Whatever you want to do. However, and this is a very big however, if you want to perform a function such as, I don't know, some sort of essentially AI, then you don't want to really be doing that in the tick method. You instead want to use a goal. And to do that, we override add goals. No, it's not called add goals, it's register goals. There you go. And you'll see there are some super goals for some classes. We don't have any as of animals. And you can just add all of the goals you want. Now, I want to keep this fairly simple, so the great thing you can do here is just copy paste this from a vanilla entity and modify it to get rid of the ones you don't want and keep the ones you would like. So let's go to pig. I don't think pigs really have any crazy AI, so we can just copy paste this and paste it in. There we go. And you'll see there are some ones we can get rid of here. So we can get rid of, for example, these tempt goals. And yeah, that's pretty much the ones you would want to get rid of. And obviously you can add a custom goal. I'm not going to be covering custom goals, by the way, before people start asking about that, because custom goals are very specific. All you need to do to add a custom goal is just extend the goal class and override all of the methods inside of here and do your logic. So obviously that would be very specific to the particular use and particular function that this goal would have. You'll see vanilla already has tons of different goals, so you know you can obviously go to the goal class and just look at its implementations. If we do that really quickly, you'll see it has 198 inheritors, and you can see all of those different ones in here. A lot of these are entity specific, but it doesn't hurt to copy paste them if you need to and use those instead. So let's also just quickly explain some of the stuff that's going on here. So all these do essentially is they get the goal selector, which is set up when you create your entity, and it adds a goal. Now this integer right here, this is the priority. So the lower the number, the higher priority that it will be. So obviously you'll see on priority 0, it says to float. And that just means whenever it is in water, no matter what else is happening, it will float. And that is a priority 0 because you don't want anything else to take over that goal, essentially. And priority 1 is for it to panic. So I don't really know why that's a 1 instead of, I guess, fair enough, maybe. Breeding, and you'll see all these different ones. Now we do actually have a gap here because we removed the temp goal. So if we want to, we can just turn these down by 1. So 6 and 7. There you go. And then just do whatever you want. Add whatever goals you want. And yeah, that will work. So you'll see there also are some numbers here. You'll just need to go into the specific goal class and see exactly what these are. Often it is the speed that it will do it. We can have a look here. This one's actually the probability. So just the probability that it will randomly stroll, I suppose. And if you look at player here, what's this one? It's float, so that gets passed into this one as the third parameter, which is this one as the third parameter, and this one as the third parameter. You'll see that's the distance that it looks at the player from. And you can do that for each of these different ones, just seeing what they are. Panic, for example, you'll probably see this one is the speed modifier. And yeah, so those are the goals. That's actually it for an entity, pretty much. Now, if you are using a living entity, however, which this tutorial is for living entities, then you're going to want to do something slightly bit different. So you're going to want to create a public static attribute supplier, and we're going to call this get attributes, and we'll probably just need to import that. We want to return attribute map. Okay. Oh, right. It doesn't like that because there's already a method with this name. Also, attribute supplier, I think, is actually what we want. We'll go do the event first. So if we come into our events package, which we created a few episodes ago, and we come into here, there is a event we want to subscribe to, and that is a public static void, and we'll just call this entity attributes, and the event we want to use is entity attribute creation event, and in here we just do event dot put, and then we just do EntityInit dot our entity, which is example dot get, and then it wants an attribute supplier, so you would do your entity class dot get attributes, and you'll see that doesn't work. So if we actually go into attribute supplier, I believe there is like a subclass that we need to use. Yes, a builder, right. So what you can do in here is just do dot build, and if we look at this, just in our class, we've removed it, right. So let's do public static attribute supplier dot builder get attributes, and that clashes. So to resolve the clash, we can say get example attributes, so the name of your entity, get example entity attributes. Actually, I'll get rid of the entity part, that's unnecessary here. And if you're using mob, one of the great things you can do is just return mob.create mob attributes. And then you can add any attribute you like. So if you do attributes dot, you can see all of the different attributes that you can use. And additionally, if you're using Forge, which obviously these tutorials are for Forge, then you can do Forge mod, and you can use some of these great attributes as well. So attack range, for example, gravity, swim speed. Gravity, you know what, we'll do that one. Sure, why not? And we'll just say 0.5. Okay, and you can just add all of your different ones. So we can do add attributes.max health, and we could set that to 25. You can do attributes dot, what else? Maybe something like movement speed. Now, something such as movement speed, you actually need to be really careful with the value that you use, as this value can massively modify the speed. Now, I don't remember exactly sort of the vanilla-ish values. I think like 7246 would be maybe reasonable. I don't really remember, but you can obviously just play around with these values. It's not anything too much of an issue. We just need to change this here as well. Let's do that. Get example attributes.build. There we go, and that will be our attributes. Obviously, if you don't already have this class, this is all you need for this class, excluding the common setup if you don't have flower pots. So you know, if you don't have a common event class, this is all you need for this tutorial. But we need this back because we still have flower pots. So the next thing we need to do is we need to create a renderer for our entity. So let's create a new package, and I like to call this client, and inside of client I'm going to create a package called renderer, and I'm also going to create another package in here, client.models, because we're going to want that too. So in the renderer package, we're going to want to create example entity renderer, and since we are using a living entity, or more specifically a mob, we can extend mob renderer. Now if you're not extending mob, then you can extend living renderer, and if you're not extending living entity, then you just need to extend entity renderer. But things get a little more complicated if you're extending entity renderer, so maybe just wait for the entity tutorial. So in the generics here, we just need to supply our entity class, so example entity, and then we also need to supply the model, so example entity model as well. Okay, fantastic. So then we're just going to need to do the things at once. So we need to implement the methods, and we need to create the constructor. Okay, fantastic. So let's just rename some parameters here. So we'll get the context, we'll get the model, and actually we don't need these two parameters here. And get text location, this is just the entity. Okay, fantastic. So we need to come, when we super here in the super call, we need to construct our entity model. So example entity model, and it would be great if I did that right. So example entity model. Okay, and then it also wants a float, and this float is the shadow size. So I'm just going to give it 0.5. Okay, the next thing we need to do is create a private static final resource location, and this is the texture location. So this will be equal to a new resource location, and first you just put in your mod ID, so tutorial mod.mod ID, and then just the full path to your textures. So textures /entities / and then just whatever the name of your entity is .png. Fantastic. And just need to put texture in there. Now obviously, as usual, this needs to be lowercase, no spaces, nothing, no crazy symbols or whatever, just needs to be the basic stuff there. Okay, the next thing we need to go ahead and do is just create the model. Actually, before we do that, we'll just go ahead and register the renderer. So let's come into our events again and mod client events. Now this is actually deprecated, we'll fix that in a future tutorial maybe. And obviously, once again, if you don't already have this class, you can just go ahead and make it. It's fairly simple, just ignore the client setup. So just ignore that this is here, and this is what you will need for this tutorial. Okay, let's add that back because we still need it. And let's do a public static void, and this will be entity renderers, and this will just be entity renderers. Is that it? Event dot no. Is it register renderers? There you go. Register renderers is the name of the event. And then we need to do event.register entity renderer. And once again, just pass in our entity. So EntityInit.example.get. And then we also need to pass in the renderer. So example entity renderer : new. Fantastic. And that doesn't work right now because probably because our model here is having some issues, and also it doesn't like this, which is interesting. I think this is all because of our model. So now we can just go ahead and create the model. Now I'm going to be using trusty old Blockbench here. So if you don't already have Blockbench installed, all you need to do, blockbench.net, and hit the download button. Fairly simple. And just open up your Blockbench. So let's come into the main screen, and you just want to hit modded entity and create a new model. And from here, you just create your model. So Blockbench controls are fairly simple. You can also use Blender keybinds or Maya keybinds if you're used to those more. However, I'm used to Blockbench, so I'll keep these keybinds. And just start making your model. Okay, and there we go. I have created my absolutely beautiful entity. I don't know what it is, don't ask. I just put some cubes together. So we're just now going to texture it. So all you need to do to create a texture is just to create texture. The alternative, obviously, is you can paint inside of Blockbench itself, but I don't really like that, so I'm not going to do that. Oh, the actual more important thing that I came back to tell you is that you need to actually make sure you group some things. So first of all, you're going to need a body, and all cubes should be inside of this body. So I'm just going to grab every single cube, plonk them in the body. Okay, from there you can go ahead and add another group, and you can call this the head. and just do this for all your different parts. And the reason is, if you ever want to add animations, then you're going to want all these different bones, because you can only rotate bones, you can't rotate cubes. So just add all your different parts inside of that. So I'm just going to select everything I want inside of there, just move them inside the head. There we go, and this will also just structure it a little bit nicer as well. So I can also add one for the for the legs. And I'm just going to go through all of these. I'm going to do these, and then I'm going to create a texture. To create the texture, you just do create texture and press confirm. You need to make sure your entity faces north. That is an extremely important thing. I don't know how I forgot to mention that, but if it doesn't face north, you're going to have some issues where you will actually have to rotate it in code. It's not the end of the world, but it's just something you ideally want to keep in mind when making a model. Alright, there we go. So that took me a while, but I have now completed the texture. So this is the final texture, and this is the final model. So I removed the other thing. it was really weird, and also I was too lazy to texture it. But yeah, this is what we have ended up with. It looks awful, I'm fully aware, but that's perfectly fine because it doesn't matter. So once you have your model, what you're going to need to do is you're going to want to first export, you want to save project, and you're going to want to save this as a BB model. And the reason being so that you can load it back up in the future if you ever want to. So I'm just going to go source main resources assets tutorial mod, and I'm just going to I'll just shove this in here for now. So example_entity, and that will just save as a BB model. We can open that back up in the future if we ever need to edit this, which we will, and I'll explain that in a future tutorial. So then we're also going to want to export as a Java entity, and we can once again go ahead and place this where we want it. So we want it in our main package, then client, then models, and we're just going to name this example entity model. Okay, fantastic. So we can now close Blockbench. Okay, and we can just check if that is here, which it is. So let's come into this class, and we're just going to want to make sure we rename some stuff in here. So you'll instantly see there are a lot of issues. So first thing we're going to do, we're just going to get rid of this t extends entity. We don't need that. We're just going to pass example entity directly into entity model. Let's just go ahead and go through here, just import some basic stuff that needs importing. So just going to change that constructor. There we go. Okay, and just import some of this. So these should be fairly simple. Import, and also we're going to want to import this part pose and layer definition. Just want to change this T to example entity. Import the pose stack and vertex consumer, and also import mesh definition. Okay, now what is the error that we have here? We don't have the package name, of course. So we're going to want to set package name, and that will just add our package declaration. And let's remove this comment, we don't need that. Okay, for this layout location, we're just going to want to change our mod ID to our mod ID, so mod ID, and name custom model to the name of your entity. So mine is just example_entity. Okay, and we can just go through, and here where we are defining all of these variables, we can remove the actual variable there because we don't need to save them as a variable. It just makes our code a little bit cleaner. So we actually do need the legs because this uses the legs. Okay, fantastic. And obviously you can clean this up however you wish to clean this up. For now, I'll just leave it like that. I'm also going to make this a var and just rename this to the mesh, and rename this to the parts. Fantastic. And I'm gonna just close off setup animation. Here is where you can do your animations. I'm not going to be covering animations in this tutorial, just so you are aware. Then we need to come into mod client events. You'll see that still has the error because we need to import it. And in here, we need to pass in context.bakeLayer. And we need to do example entity model dot layer location, and we need to import mob renderer apparently. Okay, fantastic. So that's both of those completely done. Now in mod client events, there is one more event we're going to want. So public static void, and we're going to want register layer definitions, and this will just be register layer definitions event, and we just need to do event.register layer definition, and this will be example entity model dot layer location, and then a supplier, or what we can actually do is example entity model : create body layer, and that just registers our definition so that that is all fine. We now know how the model is defined. Okay, great. So all we need to do now is run the game, I believe, unless I'm missing something crucial, which we'll see. We'll know by the time we run the game. So let's go and have a look. Alright, so yes, we did forget something. I'm not at all surprised. So let's just come into our main class. We forgot to actually register our deferred register. The simplest thing that we could forget, we forgot. So example init.entities.register bus. We really should have done that at the start so we didn't forget it, but yeah, okay. Let's try and run the game again. Alright, here we are, we're in the game, so let's go ahead and summon it. Since we haven't registered a spawn egg next, we'll be doing that in the next tutorial. So we can summon it, you'll see it spawns, we can hit him, and he panics. He is super fast because we set him to be quite fast. Oh, we forgot to do the hitbox, so let's just go ahead and do that really quickly. So if we come into EntityInit, we can do dot sized, and we're going to do about the right size. So it's really only like 1 by 1.5 maybe, or to be honest, like 1 by 1. It's probably a realistic size. Now, obviously, this isn't going to change. So, you know, oh, he's in a boat. Get out of there. This isn't going to change unless we restart the game, which I'm not going to do. I don't know why he can't jump. Very, very interesting. Possibly his step height attribute is missing. So when you register your attributes, if we come into events, mod common events, and get attributes, there we go. So you can add, oh, it's probably because of the gravity. Yeah, that would also make perfect sense. So if I summon him up here, you'll probably see that he just floats. Oh, right, okay, right, of course. So lower the number in the gravity means it's higher gravity. Yeah, that makes sense. So you would actually want to do like 1.5 if you wanted him to slow down like that. Anyways, that's about it for this tutorial. As I say, in the next tutorial we'll just be doing spawn eggs. They're very simple, don't worry. And then we'll do entity spawning. And then maybe we'll do gecko lib. We'll see. So yeah, I hope you guys did find this tutorial useful. If you did, please do be sure to smash your face into that like button and subscribe. If you really enjoyed, please do be sure to share it. And yes, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Goodbye.
Yo, who the fuck is this pig? Big stupid ragged ass, you got me fucked up. I'll murk your fuck ass.